Moving on, I'll start talking about the trade-off between these various programs, and I hope I'm in the right county here. Am I not? Oh, yeah. Okay. If you in the handout material, there's a number of counties. So rather than trying to print a bunch of separate handouts, we only printed one, but it has all the counties, including this one that I'm looking at. In this particular county, for the first year, your Olympic average yield is right there, 172.7. Now, for comparisons purposes, I assume this was the average farmer that doesn't exist. That his payment yield that he updated just happens to be the same amount as the Olympic average county yield. So it's 172 also. Now, looking down under the PLC program, when do you start getting payments under PLC? Price has to drop below what? 370, right? So no payment at 378, right? At 361, you're getting a payment rate of 9 cents, right? The difference between 370 and 361 is 9 cents. And that's multiplied times our payment yield of 172, the farmer's payment yield, 172. And we come up with a payment of $15.54 per payment acre. Okay? Now, all those calculations we just went through, what you did was calculate one cell in this matrix. So if you don't want to use any computer programs, you can go home and calculate each one of these numbers by hand and fill in the cells yourself. Most of you are not going to do that, but you can. You now have the skills to do that with. Okay? Now, in the case at 316, at that point PLC starts to pay, but it's not enough for it to just pay. It has to pay enough more that it pays more than the ARC County, and before you prefer that program. And you'll notice a couple things are going on here. As you go across this particular level, over here, we finally have the payments start to drop off in the county. Why is that? That's because we got a county yield that's well above the Olympic average county yield of 173. So a high yield can reduce or eliminate the payment. Now, what about higher prices, say $4.90? If the national average price would come in at $4.90, and I don't think it's going to be that high, at least not first year. But if it were $4.90, of course, there's no payment under PLC at all, period. But if the county yield is average, there's no payment there either. But if it's below average, there actually could be a payment. At 140, you would be maxing out the payment again. So that's how the county numbers work out compared to the PLC. Now, if the county happens to raise a yield of 173, in other words, it has a yield exactly equal to its average, the farmer's got the same average, how low does the price have to fall before the PLC will pay more? Answer, 317. When prices get below 317, then you're, at that point, it starts to exceed what you get from ARC County. It's not that you don't get paid by ARC County, you just get paid more from PLC if the price drops below 317. So if we got to 274, you're looking at $165 and change versus 91 under the county program, substantially higher payment. So that's the decision you have to make. Are you extremely risk adverse and you simply don't want to take that risk and you want to eliminate that catastrophe hit, then you might well go with PLC, even if you thought ARC County was going to pay more, at least in the early years. The other case would be if you are bankrupt with 270 corn. If that puts you at the point that you're done, call the auctioneer, it's gone. You can't afford to take the risk, in other words. You might still take PLC to protect against a catastrophic event that may not occur, but it could. It could. On the other hand, and of course, that's the exact argument I've gotten from people in Washington that have really pushed the PLC program, is that farmers need to think in terms of risk. I think the folks in Washington need to think in terms of risk. The folks in Washington assume you're risk adverse, extremely risk adverse. They've never drank beer with cattle feeders in Dodge City, Kansas. Their attitude there is, we lost a couple of $100 on that last pen of cattle we fed. We'll feed 3 pens this time, probably make it all back. All I need is a banker with some guts who will hang in there and keep rolling the loan over until it does work its way out. But it will eventually. And if they weren't feeding cattle, they'd be up the road here at the casino, probably at the tables playing. They are not risk adverse. They might even enjoy the risk. Okay? Now, farmers as a general group probably aren't quite that extreme, but they do have enough equity that they're willing to take some risk. And so they might say, well, it looks to me like we might get payments maybe in the first couple of years, and I'm willing to take the risk that we're not going to get corn prices at $3. I know that if I do this, and we do get corn prices, I'm not going to get as big a payment, but I might be willing to do that. So that's kind of, and nobody can answer that question for you. That's really a question you're going to have to answer. Am I willing to take the risk that we won't have that $3 corn? How many of you think we're going to have $3 corn, just out of curiosity? Anybody here? Anyone in that parish? Anyone? You guys are all bullish, huh? Maybe I didn't ask the question right. How many of you think we're going to have $5 corn? How many of you think we're definitely not having $5 corn? Now, finally, I got some hands up. All right. Oh, information. Hard. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Most farmers I talk to, and I think it's because they're looking at where markets are right now, are not that bearish from the standpoint they really expect prices below $3. And we are not talking about the harvest low. We are talking about a national average price for the entire marketing year. So we're not talking about your local cash price where the basis is $1 under, something like that. We're talking about the national average price. Question back there.
When you're looking at this, or when I look at this, if this farm here has 1,000 base acres where you get paid on, and you're getting paid, and the price gets down to below $3, where you're, and the payment limit, I guess my point, is $125,000. And you're going to hit that, so the PLC becomes irrelevant.
Yep.
And then it doesn't pay anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. If you're a big farm over the payment limit, then the fact that the PLC payment, even if it is bigger, doesn't do any good. So that helps you eliminate one of the choices. It's easier decision for a large farm than it is a little farm. By the way, what is the definition of a large corporate farm? Anybody know the definition? They don't know in Washington. I want you to write it down because I do know the answer. The big, nasty corporate farmer is anybody that got an acre more than I've got. Anybody an acre less is a family farmer. I was on a farm that I think they had something like 80 circles of corn. Figure out how big that is. First thing they told me is they were a family farm. They were. They were all related. Father, son, grandfather was in this operation. The second thing they told me was that there's a bigger farm in California than what they are, and one in Israel that's bigger. So no matter how big you are, you can usually find somebody that's larger than you are. But nonetheless, these payment limits make a lot of good politics, but they don't make any economic sense. And if I'm offending you, I'm sorry, but that's especially true in the insurance program. If you start putting limits on the insurance payments, and they've been discussed, first of all, you're going to eliminate the risk management aspect, particularly at $125,000. Even for a modest-sized farm, if you have a crop failure, $125,000 ain't going to cut it. The second point is that if the larger farms leave, maybe few farmers, but it's a big share of the premium. You could take 30% of the premium out of that insurance pool. And if those are generating gains, guess what? That makes the insurance pool unsound, and you're going to have to raise the rates on the people that are left in the pool, compounding the problem. It'll also screw up the delivery system through the folks here, quite frankly. So from an economic standpoint, they don't make a lot of sense, but boy, the politics really work. And that's why they always come out. Yes, sir.
Are those payment limits equal across all programs?
Yes, 125 across all of these, yes. What I'm referring to in the public policy debate going on now, there's two things that are out there. One, there are certain people, I'm not one of them, but there's certain people that want to eliminate the harvest price. For those who don't know, I guess I am responsible for the harvest price. I worked for the private company back in 1990. One thing that proves I'm old, and it also tells you how long this stuff has been around. But that was introduced in 1990 as a private product. So when I say this is stupid to eliminate the harvest price, and I say that because it's what offsets a forward contract. If you're a dairy farmer and you need to replace your feed, you're going to have to replace it at the higher price if your crop fails. All it's doing is just replacing your crop at the current market value. So there's a lot of reasons why people would want to have this harvest price. But I get viewed as biased because I had a hand in the development of it. I'm going to be gone in a couple of years, so I guess I'll have to find somebody else to hit on that. Yes, sir.
So if you went in ARC County, then there'd be no need to upgrade your yield.
Yes, if you went to Ark County, you don't initially benefit from updating your yields. I'm saying you should anyway, because you don't know when we're going to get the update again. We might go the next 15 years and no updates. And you don't know what the next farm program is going to look like. We may revert back to the payment yield in the next program, and it would be ideal to have a higher number. So if you can prove a higher number, there's no negative for proving a higher number. And it also would add value to the land depending on what they do with the next farm bill. So, but you're right, it doesn't come into play on the Ark County program. The only one it comes into play on is the PLC. So, a couple other points I want to make. What if your program yield is 180 bushels? Is the break-even point now at 317? And if no, is it higher or lower? How many say higher? Well, the answer is higher. If that yield, that price can be higher, and if you got a higher program yield, because because you're multiplying the payment rate times a bigger payment yield. Now, on the other hand, if your payment yield is less than the Olympic average county price, then the price is going to have to drop more than 317 before PLC will pay more than the ARC program. Okay. So that's what it's going to come down to. In many cases, it's pretty much a price forecast. The other half of that coin is what happens on the yield side. I've got the same thing, and you can study this on your own. For soybeans, the break-even point there doing the same thing, 717. For wheat, it's 484. At this point on the wheat market, I'm at 613. So the point I'd make here is at 613, you basically are going to have a yield loss at the county level for ARC wheat to pay. PLC at 660, because that's 550. If I'm right on the 613 number, then there is no PLC payment, period. In fact, I'm willing to say that right now. But you're also going to have yield loss to trigger under the ARC County. So wheat may not pay anything this first year. Wheat may not generate any payment. Yes, sir.
Can you go back 2 slides, just because I'm more familiar with those numbers? So then, to use that chart, as you change your yield, those red lines in that column go up and down. Use this as a decision tool. Those red lines under your MYA price.
Yes.
So as you change your program yield and reference price, those lines go up and down, and that's where you decide? Is that how you...
No. What this is I'm simply showing at what point does PLC start to pay.
Depending on...
No, it doesn't matter on anything. The PLC is strictly a price guarantee, and the price has to be below 370 to trigger anything. And I got this line drawn in because at this point is roughly where PLC starts to pay more.
Okay, so I can change anything on top there and those lines stay the same.
On the PLC side, with the exception of the payment yield, because the PLC payment rate is multiplied times the payment yield.
Program yield?
Program yield. Yeah. Okay? Okay, moving on. Next thing we're going to look at is, well, what do those prices look like? And again, these are these are prices for the whole country, they're not just Kansas, they apply to Minnesota too. The prices prior to 13, those are all done. Those are final. The price here in 15, those are KSU estimates, and these are Missouri estimates, University of Missouri, back rate. Okay? Now, notice when you look down this list here, in the first year, if these estimates are right, for example, on the corn, how much PLC can you expect in the first year if this forecast is right? None, because it's well above 370 at 399. If we look at the, by the way, well, I guess your numbers were updated because I sent those on to them earlier. In the case of sorghum, it's the only one that looks like it might have a payment under ARC at this point. Why is that? Well, sorghum has a really high reference price, $3.95 versus $3.70 for corn. In the past, those numbers have been about the same. Why is sorghum at $3.95 and corn only at $3.70? Obviously, somebody put that into the legislation and it flew under the radar screen and nobody paid any attention to it. The other thing is sorghum's a relatively small crop, so it has very little impact on budget. But it has a substantially higher one, and we probably will have some people that will keep their sorghum base even though they could qualify for more corn base. Again, they should run those numbers through one of the computer models. At 613 on the wheat, there would be no payment in the first year. Now, Fabry's expecting much lower prices out here in the future, which would generate payments on the wheat. I'm not so sure I agree with them on this, and here's my logic. It's hard to really drive down wheat prices without driving down corn prices, because what happens out in the Great Plains when wheat gets cheap? They feed it rather than feeding corn. So I'm not sure I really question those numbers. I don't have any, I think their guess is as good as mine on the rest, but I think they're a little too bearish on the wheat. That's just my opinion. Obviously, you're talking a long ways out in the future. The reality is trying to forecast beyond just a few months is iffy at best. And all forecasts are wrong, including mine. That's why I like to leave town quickly so that you can't corner me about the last forecast. And most of you don't remember what the last forecast was, and that works out in my favor too. Looking next, the Olympic average price. And right now, I'm showing the Olympic average price will not go down next year on corn. And that's because of the distribution of the prices and what gets thrown out and what comes in. And I'll get to more detail in a minute on this. And I actually show it going up on wheat. I'm expecting it to be higher next year than it was this year. Now, that doesn't mean your guarantee is going to be higher, does it? Because if your price goes up, but if your Olympic average county yield goes down, and this is going to vary by county and by crop, but if it goes down, your revenue guarantee will actually be smaller next year than it was this year, even though the price went up. Same thing with the corn. Even though the corn price is not going to change, if your Olympic average corn yield is lower next year, then your guarantee will be lower next year than it was this year. Okay? And I go ahead and fill in the break-even prices between PLC and ARC. So you got them all there together. Briefly, ARC is a 5-year Olympic average revenue, the individual is, versus the county. It pays on 65 rather than 85%. The individual does. All crop revenue counts towards the guarantee under ARC individual. So if you're diversified, it will be of less use. What I'm talking about too is you take this county revenue benchmark, 529, that's the national average price, times 90 bushels. In this example, this is a county yield. And I'm comparing that to a farm with 150 bushel doing the individual. I multiply the 90 bushels times the county, and I get $476 worth of revenue. Take 85%, that's locked into the law, and I end up with a payment rate of $40.47 on all base acres. I did exactly the same thing on the individual. The gross revenue, much higher, of course. 10% stop loss puts it at $79.35, but when you adjust it down to the acres that don't get payments on a base, because you take the 65% number, that drops down the average payment rate to 51.58. That puts it much closer to this number here. So, you know, that's $9. Is $9 worth your time to go to the record keeping that's going to be required to do the individual? And that will vary by farm. Some of you may even like doing records. Maybe you were an accountant in another job somewhere and this is your favorite thing. Not a problem at all. Also, you have to keep records for crop insurance. Other than the unit structure, they would be similar to this too. So it's not like you won't have the data, but you're going to have to put it in the form that FSA wants it. And you'll have to do that every year. And it's going to change whenever you change the crop mix, okay? And so you have to think in terms, is it enough payment to make it worth my time? Let's talk about the price and how they come up with it. This is the farm price, or the national average price that I keep referring to. And the way it's calculated, I'm going to do wheat first. Back in June, the price for June was $6.50. That's already been published. That's done. Where they get this number is they surveyed the large grain buyers, and some of the smaller ones are also surveyed. And they come up with an estimate of the total bushels of wheat purchased in that month and the total dollars paid for those bushels, and they divide the two numbers to come up with the $6.50 figure. NAS, which is a division of USAA, does this. And then at the end of the marketing year, and for wheat, the marketing year is June 1 through May 31st. And at the end of May, it won't come out till the 1st of July, but they will go in and calculate the percent of the crop sold in that month. So the 13% there is an estimate of KSU. And the other thing about the 13%, it is based on historical numbers. But in the case of wheat, soybeans, and corn, it's been a very stable number. In other words, to greatly change these percentages, farmers would have to make big changes in the way they market their crops. And typically, in the aggregate, you don't. As an individual, you might, but not in the aggregate, you don't. So that means these prices, well, with the bigger weights, have more influence on the price, and they happen to be in the first 3 months of the marketing year. At the end of the first 3 months of the marketing year on wheat, you know half the price. Done deal. By March 1st, these numbers are going to turn black. They're red now, they're estimates. By March 1st, they're going to turn black because NAS will have published those numbers, okay? That's why I'm saying I'm not in a hurry to sign up until March 1st because I'm going to have a much better price estimate on March 1st. But and that means you've only got 3 prices left that will be forecast at that point for wheat and very low estimated weights. So regardless of what the price is, they're not going to have much impact on the outcome of this weighted national average price. When we look, let's just say I'm right at 613. You plug in the 613 next year, that turns out to be correct, and we redo the Olympic average. Well, the first thing you do is next year, the 9-year is going to drop out, and the 613 is going to come into the average, and the low price is 570, and that will drop out once we do the Olympic averaging, and the high price, of course, will still be this 777, which will be there until the last 2 years of the Farm Bill. And what that's going to do is it is going to increase the price. And I'm virtually certain we're looking at an increased price on wheat. Now, you could have a lower county yield and actually drop the guarantee, but the price itself is going up. What about corn, which is what you're interested in? Well, corn marketing year is different. It's September 1 through August 31st, so we don't have as many prices, do we? Well, it's the same method. But notice the big weights are here. That's had big impacts. You notice you skipped December? Why? You don't want to pay income taxes. That's why people skip December. So the sales drop off in December as a typical rule. Get to January and now need to get some sold. probably got some notes due and that sort of thing, and need to make some payments. So, January in the past has carried the largest weight. So when will we know that number for final? We won't know the weight, obviously, but on the 1st of March, will be right here. Those prices will turn black, and they will be actual, and a big chunk, over half the price, will be determined, and it will leave these remaining months to be estimated with much lower weights. If they extend the sign-up, we will know even more about that corn price. But right now, where it sets, I'm at $3.99. That's actually a little higher than it was last month at $3.84. Again, at $3.99, we plug that number in, let's just say it's correct, in the next year when we redo the Olympic average, and it's a moving Olympic average, so this year drops out. And now we look at what the high is and the low. Well, the high is still the 689, so it drops out the Olympic average, and 399 is the low. As a result, the price will not change. It'll be the same next year. Now, what price would need to happen this year in order for the price to go up on corn? The price will need to be above $4.46. We would need a price above $4.46 for this year in order to increase the price on corn's guarantee next year. I don't think there's much chance of that happening either, that we're going to get to that level, since we've already got a bunch of prices already determined. But you're going to have a lot more information next month. How do you get that, those numbers and those weights and all that stuff, and you can simply look at them? Well, you can look them up on the web. You can go to the USDA, you can get them. Or you can do it the easy way. You could actually come to our website and get them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send around a sign-up sheet. If you'd like to be on an email list, what you will get is a note every time we've updated the website. New information on the Farm Bill, etc., along with these price numbers, which come out every month. And the advantage is you get a note, what it is, and it will be a link there, and it will take you to this exact site. And you can see immediately what the number is. Or if you're not interested, you just delete it, and it's gone, okay? Now, don't put your name on here unless you want to hear from us, because you will hear from us. On the other hand, there is no cost to be on our mail list, so I will send this sheet around. I'm going to send one down this way, and I'll start the other one back here on the back row. You guys follow the back row here? Okay. Anyway, and we will be updating that to the end, because that number is going to determine what a lot of people want to end up doing. We do the same thing with the sorghum, which you're not interested in, but we also do this for soybeans. Same story on soybeans. Price is not going to change next year based on what looks like the number that's in play. Again, we're waiting on this number right here, this January number, because of the weight. And we'll know that around the 1st of March. Around the 1st of March. So still a lot of information is going to be added to the corn and soybeans. The other half of this, of course, is the what the county yield number is. And we are in Sibley, right? Okay. The Olympic average yield for this county is 172. More importantly, not a lot of yield risk around it, or at least over that period of time. Those are the percent below average and the percent above average. What if you had a average yield, Olympic average yield, where you have no variation? The standard error is 0. Standard deviation is 0. Remember your stat classes? You have a mean, and it varies around it. Well, in this case, let's say it's 0. No yield risk at all. Same yield every year. It's pretty close to that is the case for York County, Nebraska, which is all under center pivot. And it doesn't vary much from year to year. How is that going to work under this program? What does our county turn into if there's no yield variation in that county? And county yields will have less variation than the individual yields. What does this revert to? Well, if there's no yield variability, it's a put option. It's a put option. It's price guarantee. What's the strike? I don't have the number exact on the tip of my lips, but basically I can tell you how to get it. Take out your calculator and multiply 86% times the 529 national average price. I think it works out to about 452, 53, something like that. That is the price. And if you don't have any yield variability, basically you're going to get paid based on whether or not the price drops below that number. And you've taken the deductible out. What's the price guarantee under PLC? 370 versus 450. Which strike would you rather have? So if you're in a county with low yield variability, I think that makes the county thing look a lot better for this reason. If you go to an individual coverage, and you do get more variability at the individual level, because bringing everything to the county level obviously averages everything. But you went to an individual coverage, let's say you had a 30% yield loss. It won't matter, probably. Why? Because you get stopped out with that 10% stop loss. You only needed a 10% yield loss. The extra did nothing for you. On the other hand, if it's plus or minus 30%, then you can get a yield that's 30% higher. What's that do to your payment? It cuts it or eliminates it. And there's no stop to the upside. Effectively, the only stop is to the downside, and it's because of that 10% stop loss. So if you don't have much yield variability, either direction, then basically it becomes a price guarantee. And if you wanted to, you could actually sell that 450 put today, and it's worth a lot of money because it's in the money. Now, I don't suggest you sell puts against the farm program unless you've lost money trading options, because it's a lot more complicated than what I just said. But I think it does point out to you that it does have value. Blue Earth really has almost no variability. That's not too far from here. I did the same thing with the other crops. Now, looking at this example here, this is a Kansas example. What I'm looking at here is the yield history for this county, and in this case, the low yield is there. The high yield is the 197, and that gets eliminated. Down here, under the individual, it's revenue guarantee rather than Olympic average price times each other. So in this case, you have to calculate the revenue for each year, and the county, and I'm saying this farmer's yield were the same as the county. In other words, he's the average farmer, which doesn't exist. But I take the 173 times the 370 reference price, I get 6410 in the first year, for example, and I do that for each year. So then I go in and I drop out the high revenue year, which is that one, and I drop out the low revenue year, which is this one, 640. Now, if it turns out they're almost the same, 965 is your benchmark revenue under county, and the benchmark revenue under individual is 966. So in this case, it's almost the same. But what about next year? Well, next year, my low revenue figure is going to drop out. And I can calculate next year's number right now because I know my yield, and at least by March 1st, I would have a number that I'd be comfortable with on a forecast that I can multiply the two numbers and actually know what my yield is going to be, revenue is going to be for the next year. And if it's higher than 825, then your revenue is going to go up next year, your revenue guarantee. Where over here, you're going to lose the 173, the 197 will still be in there, and we're going to need a yield above 153, and that 153 is in your data set until the last year of the farm bill. That low yield is in your data set until the last year of the farm bill. So when you start looking at the distributions of the revenues, excuse me, the revenue, you like the distribution better because I'm losing the low year. The high year of 1181, I hate losing that. I'll lose it after 3 years, but I still got a pretty good one here at 1054 that's going to be there for a while. And I can actually calculate this number here because I already know my yield. So you'll know if that's going to go up or down this year. So, choosing? Okay. I don't think you're gonna see any weak PLC payments at all. I can virtually guarantee that. Yeah, just go ahead and say it. Slim and none, and Slim left town, nada, goose egg, zilch, nothing, under PLC. Under Ark County, for wheat, it's gonna take some yield loss at the county level probably to generate any payments there. That yield comes in at average, no payments. Now, we got a lot of counties in Kansas that had wheat losses this year, so I'm anticipating that there will be Ark County payments made in Kansas. Corn, it's looking less likely that there's going to be PLC payments. If I'm anywhere close to right, and if you believe the FAPRI numbers, again, those are all forecasts, and they never work out to be correct, but if they did, there would be no payments under PLC during the life of the Farm Bill for corn. Sorghum has the greatest chance of collecting under PLC. So, you're basically going to end up guessing about future years and prices. And I'm anticipating a lot of people are going to put a lot of weight on the first couple of years, thinking, well, if I can get payments in the first 2 years, I'll worry about the back 3 later. And I don't know, I don't have a better solution than that, but that's what you're betting on. And as said earlier, if you're over the payment limit, it's not really an issue anyway, because even if the PLC pays more, you couldn't collect it anyway, so that actually makes the decision easier, okay? Finally, later than I want to. Real briefly, talk about, we do have a decision aid tool that we cooperated with at Oklahoma State. The story, a little bit of story background here. Oklahoma State received a grant from the Southern Risk Center to build this with. The professor is a young gal, and they wouldn't fund her until the Farm Bill was passed, so she didn't get funded her first year. And the second year, she didn't actually put in a proposal, but they called her and said, oh, Farm Bill passed, we'll fund you now. So she received the grant, and I'm not going to give money back. I'll tell you how that works. Anyway, we talked to them about joining in and working with them on the development of this. And so I went to my department head and I said, well, you know, we ought to put a little cash in this thing and get our name on the program too. You can't imagine how difficult it is to send cash from one university to another, particularly one you compete with for graduate students, and more important, those few rare individuals that have 4.2 speed. By the way, if anybody in this room's got a son or grandson with 4.2 speed, do not leave. I want to talk to you. They really don't want to go to be a gopher. They need to come be a wildcat. We got a good deal for them. We'll fix them up. We'll take care of them. All right. Anyway, as soon as the check went down and came back, I get a call from Oklahoma State, and they said, Art, if you'd like to have more purple on this, just send more money. So I went to my department head and asked him, and he said, nah, I think there's enough purple on it already. I think I'll pass. So that's how the color combination came up. The other thing is, initially we didn't think we were going to get any money to do education with. So we were planning to self-finance everything in Kansas. And the way I was going to do that is charge registration fees. And what happened then is we had a number of corporate sponsors that came to us and said, well, we'd like to buy the tickets for our customers. So we'd like to pay their registration fee for them. Didn't make any difference to us who paid it. So we said fine, and in return, they are going to get their names and logos and credits on our slides and everything we hand out. So they're getting a little advertising here too. And that was all fine, but then at the last minute, Congress decided to give us some money to do education with. And it went to all the land grants, including the University of Minnesota. And it was what they call formula funding, basically based on the number of farmers there are in the state. But it had 2 strings attached. Number one, you couldn't charge for meetings. And all of a sudden, it looks stupid that we require a ticket. We're still going to require a ticket, even though we can't charge for the meeting. If you show up at the meeting without a ticket, I will get a sponsor, I assure you, who will be there to come give you a ticket. So we'll take care of the ticket. The one thing we do need is anybody who's going to come to any of our locations is to call us, because we can't guarantee you a seat. If you didn't call in ahead of time, I'm not worried about it. I got a bunch of people back at K-State just sweating all over themselves, thinking we're going to exceed 500 people in Wichita. I don't think we'll get 500, we might get a couple hundred. But that's what the room will hold. And so once we get to that level, we can't let any more people in, then priority will be given to those who call in. Nothing would make you madder than traveling a long distance to attend that meeting and not get in the meeting. So just show up. Yeah, we'll try to accommodate everybody that just shows up. I don't think we'll run out of room at any of our locations, but nonetheless, that's out there. The second requirement was you had to use either the Texas A&M or the University of Illinois software. In other words, we can't use our own. We have a workaround. Our software does not cover cotton. To my knowledge, Texas A&M is the only software that does cover cotton, and for cotton, we are using Texas A&M software and meeting the requirements of the guidelines. My understanding is the University of Minnesota Extension Services is using the software at the University of Illinois. Nothing wrong with any of those, and what I'm told is the University of Illinois approach is simple and easy to use. I don't know if that's true or not, but because I haven't actually run it, but that's what I'm being told. The other difference is those software programs are on the servers at those universities. In other words, you have to hook in by the internet. So if you have a slow internet, that might create some problems, etc. In our case, it is downloaded to your machine. So all the calculations, your data doesn't go anywhere. It stays right on your machine, and you're running this spreadsheet internally on your machine. It doesn't go anywhere else. Now, it does require a fairly new copy of Excel. It can't be an Excel copy that's 10 years old. And the reason is it has to be a copy that can support menus and drop-down menus and data files. Since we've got the whole country in this, you have to use all those capabilities. So, what I'm talking about is you're going to get drop-down menus like this, and you pick your state, then you pick your county, and you pick your crops. Everything but cotton. Everything but cotton. Cotton's a totally different program. If you know somebody wants to be in on the cotton end, we will cover cotton in Wichita. It'll be the only location that we do. In this case, I picked Oklahoma, and I picked Garfield County in Oklahoma. You would simply go in and enter your numbers, APH, base acres, etc. You would also enter in your historical yields. And it takes those historical yields and calculates what your updated base acres would look like and what your updated payment yield would look like. In this case, he had nothing but wheat planted through 12. He planted wheat, canola in 13, but he can't put canola into his reallocated base because it only covers the period 9 through 12. So since he only had wheat, he can't reallocate any base acres. He's going to stay at 300 acres of wheat base. On the program yield side, that worked out to 36.5. So this will calculate what your payment or your program yield is. If you want it to do it for you, it will do that. In this case, the current FSA yield that came in the letter is higher than what the updated yield would be. And the program assumes you'd rather have the higher yield than the lower yield. So it just takes that number. On the price side, for example, $3.40, and I just said I'm at almost $4 on this number. They're at $3.40. If you think I'm closer to right, you simply type over that. By the way, this slide's a little bit out of date. Since this slide was created, Oklahoma State has updated this data file with the most current factory prices from the University of Missouri. And I know they came up with their corn price too. But if you don't agree with the price, all you have to do is type over the top of it. Just move your pointer down there and type over the top of it. You would enter in your yields and acres and whatnot from past history. And these, of course, are just guesses of what you think is going to happen. It fills them in either based on trend yield or average yield, depending on what you tell it to do. And then we come down, you fill in the prices for the next few years. Again, it's going to fill them in using backward prices, but you can type over the top of them if you don't agree. Okay? Anyway, work through the numbers, and in this case, we are showing a payment here under the assumptions that we put in. Of course, you want to rerun it with new set of assumptions. You got to run it with high prices and low prices, etc., to see, get a feel for how these programs would work. And it gives you results both for a reallocated base and a current base. Since this farm cannot reallocate base, the numbers are the same. it also discounts the payments at a 5% rate. In other words, a payment here in 14 is worth more to you than a payment out here in 18. Okay? That's all that's saying. Again, plugging in the prices, it fills them in, loan rates, those are fixed. We generate PLC payments. Obviously, whoever entered the data here plugged in a price below the 550 number, so there is a weak payment there in 15 because there was a price entered that was below the trigger point. Now, whether or not that will happen, we don't know. Anyway, and it summarizes all the results and then puts it out in a graph format. Since this was done, the individual coverage has now been completed. Anyway, that's out there on the Ag Manager website. You can either get it from us or you can get it from OSU. You're going to get it from the same location because it's only stored in one location. If you come through us, we're going to ask for your email address. Now, what we do with that email address is if there is a change to the program or a modification, we can email you a note and say there's been an updated correction to the program and get the update, and you're going to know there's a new update out there. If you go through Oklahoma State's site, they can't capture emails for some reason. And as a result, what you'll have to do then is check back every once in a while to see if there's been an update to the program. So, other than that, there's no difference. Exactly the same program in both locations. This is a slide that's actually not in your handout, but these are things on the web that might be of interest. First of all, these first three are videos that simply go through the calculations that we did here today, including the soybeans. Goes through the whole 9 yards. This one right here basically is taking you through the steps of running the computer model from K-State if you want to use it. And finally, these are probably the two simpler publications we have, frequently asked questions and also a glossary of Farm Bill terms. If you have somebody that knows very little about this program, these would be the first two documents that I probably suggest they read. So if you got some landlords that want a little background, you might copy those two documents off and send it to them, mail it to them because they probably don't have internet. Okay? These are the people that were involved in this. If you have questions, I suggest you contact Robin. Many cases, if the questions comes to me, I will forward it on to her anyway. She has done a lot of the research on this Farm Bill, very knowledgeable, and in most cases, like I said, if you write me, I probably will forward it to her. I'm out traveling, and so she's going to get to you quicker than I will get it done. And it may be her anyway answering it. So, questions? It's sort of, the way it works at the university, how it works. Two professors, you heard this one before, two professors were in the coffee room chatting one morning. These two professors got in an argument over how much work sex was versus pleasure. One was arguing 80% pleasure and 20% work. The other was making the opposite argument. About that time, a graduate student walks in and says, well, why don't we let him settle the argument? And they agreed to that. So they asked him, and his response after thinking about it a little bit, I'm pretty sure it's 100% pleasure, because if there's any work involved, you professors would have us doing it. So that's kind of how we handle Robin. She's doing the work, I'm taking the credit. Yeah. But she's very bright, very good. Okay, we've got to wind down here real quick, I guess. I'll be around if there's questions afterwards. We can certainly take them.